Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah wa ba'd. Muslims in America before Columbus. This was a dangerous statement made by the president of Turkey, Tayyip Erdogan, near the end of 2014. And when he made that statement, people, so-called intellectuals around the world, were upset. And they challenged the president. How dare you say this? What is your proof? How can you think like this? This course that we are involved in will show you, will prove to you that he was correct, and will bring you some information that I don't even think that he has privy to in Turkey itself. But in order to go into this information, we have to begin to deconstruct the way we think, to take down the walls of Eurocentrism, where we center ourselves in Europe, that civilization began in Europe, that all organized life began in Europe, and before that people were very primitive. I was shocked to find actually myself as a historian when I traveled to Egypt and I went to Giza, to the Great Pyramid. And then I went up the Nile all the way to Aswan and to Abu Simbel. And during this journey, I found that the ancient Egyptians had reached the heights of civilization from way back. It was 3,200 BC that Menes or Number united Upper and Lower Egypt. It was around 3000 that the step pyramids, the step pyramid of Saqqara, just after 3000 was built. An amazing structure. And it was only a few centuries later that we find this huge pyramid in Giza, which is about 2,300,000 blocks of granite. Some of the stones are 20 tons. They chiseled the stones from a granite quarry in Aswan, and they carried them north, and they laid them into position with no cement. When we build a building today and we have our bricks, and we level it and we have our cement, the Egyptians didn't need cement because their cutting was precise. The corners of the pyramid are right angles. All of the elements of modern day physics, engineering can be found within that structure. This is like 2650 BC. The Greeks only organized themselves in 600 BC, 2,000 years after the pyramids. So if you have a concept that it came from the Greeks, that they were the ones that started math, they were the ones that started geometry, then there's something wrong here. And during the Olympics, some years ago, the Greeks marched out when it was in Athens and they said, we began geometry, we began science. But the early Greeks would not say that, because the early Greeks understood that they got their knowledge from the Egyptians and the Phoenicians who were in Lebanon. They were the ones, this is where they got their knowledge from, and they were not ashamed to actually admit this to the world. And amongst the ancient Egyptians, by the way, there was also Tawheed, because the Pharaoh we know as Fir'aun in the Quran is only one of their leaders. There were many leaders of Egypt, and some of them, there's documented evidence about their beliefs. The shahid here is, in Eurocentric thinking, the Greeks, who 600 BC, right, they started everything and gave it to the Egyptians, but when you look at reality, 2,000 years before the Greeks, it was already here. So we have to change around our thinking. And it is the same type of thinking that creates an inferiority complex amongst the Muslims and a superiority complex amongst the other nations, so that today a situation would happen in France And when French blood is spilt, and it is a tragedy that it's spilt, it is not the same as other people. Why? Where's the outcry when people are dying in other parts of the world? It's Eurocentrism. It's an inferiority complex that we have inherited from the educational system. So this knowledge that we are gaining today is to help us come out of this Eurocentric thinking to a type of Mecca-centric, where we are centered with the prophets, and we center ourselves with the divine knowledge. And so in looking at the spread of Islam in the world, because somebody would say, how can you Muslims have spread Islam? All you people can do is blow things up. How are you involved in science and math and technology? Like, this does not make sense. That's not the people that I know. Okay, where do you get this from? They will challenge you. How can you say this? How does Islam cross more barriers than any other civilization in history? The essence is a tawheed. It is the unity of our understanding of the Creator. Secondly, the unity of human beings, that we unite the human family. We do not distinguish between people's color or their language or their geographical location. Illa bit taqwa. It is taqwa, it is piety and right action, God consciousness, that separates human beings. And so the tawheed of humanity, and also the tawheed of knowledge. This is the concept that Muslims had when they went out. And it became like a competition. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يَرْفَعِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ وَاللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرٌ. Allah will exalt those of you who believe and those who are given knowledge to high degrees. And Allah is aware of all that you do. The Prophet ﷺ told the believers, seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. He told them, talab al-ilm farida ala kulli Muslim. Seeking knowledge is compulsory on all Muslims. So when the Muslims went out, they were thirsty for knowledge. Okay, so this is how it came about. They were not a conquering army, slaughtering people, chopping off their heads, burning everything. They were bringing the message of Tawheed to people. Their job that was given to them by the Prophet ﷺ was to take this message to all those human beings who are absent. And so they traveled through the lands. And as they traveled, they encountered amazing things. They encountered storehouses of knowledge. In ancient Egypt, they encountered knowledge from the Romans. Then they went to Iraq, Tigris and Euphrates, the ancient Babylonian societies. They crossed into India and found, amazing wisdom in ancient India. They went to China, to a land that most people never even heard of before, and found the great progress of the Chinese nations. And so instead of destroying all the knowledge, killing all the scholars, they assimilated it. You see, they took it inside. They took it in. It became part of Islamic knowledge, because we see that knowledge is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah gives knowledge to whom He pleases, and it comes in different forms. And so this was the inspiration that the early Muslims had when they went out traveling across the world. Following this, as the Islamic empires developed, Muslims invested in knowledge. You will see today, one of the reasons why the British, the French, then the Americans, why they reached such a high level in terms of knowledge, is because they invested in it. They put money into the institutions. They saw it as part of their economy, part of their success. And so Harvard University is developed. Yale, great institutions are developed. And it's not just so-called American people, because Americans are immigrants. They are people from different parts of the world who come into a think tank. So they come into the university. The university gives you a scholarship. It gives you research money, and your ability, you are able to take, your knowledge and put it into a practical form. And then when you finish that, they will invest in your project. I remember meeting a Muslim brother in the Boston area. He was from Uganda, and he was a nuclear physicist. And you'll see many Muslims like this. He's a nuclear physicist on a high level. But if he leaves America and goes back to his country, he has nothing to do but maybe go into a university and sign papers and grade papers, because there's no systems that are there. But in America, the Americans were smart enough to give him a job. So when you go to Silicon Valley in California, you will find that many of the great IT people in Silicon Valley are actually Muslims. Cape Canaveral. You will see that, go to Texas, you'll see with the achievements being made. Many of them are Muslims. Some are Hindu. Some are from other nations who have bought into the American dream and became part of the system. So this is not hocus pocus. What happened to the Muslims is that the Muslims also developed think tanks. We actually set the pace for the university system here. They learned from us. How was this done? If we go back to the 9th century, you will find in the Abbasid Khilafat, under the Abbasids, Banu Abbas, that many of their leaders, especially one in particular, his name was Ma'mun. Ma'mun, he put special emphasis on knowledge. And so he developed a place that they called it Beitul Hikmah, the house of wisdom. Now the house of wisdom was set up in such a way in Baghdad, and so they would, for instance, they would have a conference on mathematics. So they would put out a reward for any scientist, any thinker in any part of the world who knows something about math. And so probably somebody would come from Egypt. Right? Somebody would come from Greece. So they would have a think tank. They would have a halaqah. And in that circle would be a Christian, a Hindu, Buddhist, Jew, Muslim, right? Run by the Muslims, financed by the government. And they say, talk about zero, talk about math, come up with an advancement. And so they sit together and they reach the concept of zero, which the ancient Egyptians had. I found it in the temple of Saqqara in Egypt, which was built around 2,800 BC or so, 3,000 BC. I went down into the temple and there was a relief on the wall, inscriptions, and they had 0 decimal numbers, like they had this thing about 3,000. Indians had it also. And so in the think tank, they brought the information together. They called the construct, the concept of this zero, they called it sifr. Sifr. So this is where your word zero comes from. Zero is an Arabic word. The concept was used by people before. But to organize it and put it into a system, Muslims did this. So when you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're actually counting with Arabic numerals. How many people know that? Go to the main school system in Toronto. Ask the math teachers. Go to the students. Do you know where these numbers came from? Most of them will probably say Greece, Athens. Right? Not knowing they're counting in Arabic. That would be a shock to them to know this. But this is what happened in the think tanks of the great Abbasid Khilafat. The great achievement of the Muslims was to take the knowledge from different peoples. From a theoretical form, they put it into a precise practical form. So people had concepts. How do you now take that and make it into a physical reality? This was our achievement. And because we had such a large empire and such great wealth, we had the ability to do this. And that is the reason why you'll see America, in this few hundred years, make such leaps and bounds. Because of wars that are happening, they have to make discoveries, and they have to improve in order to fight the wars and to build their economy. And so they bring people from around the world, they pay the money, and they make the success. So this is not hocus pocus. This is not magic. There's nobody flying on a carpet saying open sesame. This is a reality that happened to the Muslims during this time, but unfortunately, it is struck out of the history books. You will not find this in the average history books. So scientists of different groupings helped to make the achievements. Some of these amazing achievements that were being done in a number of different areas. One of the areas which is of importance to us, there's a few areas I want to stress on, because so many areas, but there's a few areas we want to stress on because that helps us to understand how Muslims could go across the Atlantic. That's my thesis. How can they make it across before Columbus? How can they travel around the world? Geography was one of our areas. And in geography, Muslims developed a number of amazing travelogues. These are early atlases, encyclopedia. You know the concept of an almanac? Before you Google it. Today, everybody, you Google it, right? But in the past, you have to have an almanac. So an almanac will give you all types of information. An encyclopedia gives you all types of information. Almanac is an Arabic word, almanach. That's an Arabic word. It was Muslims who developed this. And we put it together for practical reasons because people had to travel long distances. If you wanted to do business, if you want to, make Hajj, right? You got to travel to different countries, long distances, right? And so we drew maps. We had books with all types of maps inside of them. We even made globes. We made amazing achievements. This is probably one of the most astounding achievements, and that is the development of the magnetic needle that led to the first true compass. It was Muslims who actually developed the first compasses. This completely revolutionized international travel. And this is what enabled us to be able to cross many of the barriers. Another example of this, just to give you a practical example of how this knowledge came about. During the Abbasid Khilafat of Ma'mun, Baghdad was being built. They were using grids to build the city, engineering. So they built it on grids, and they had to look at the irrigation in terms of the Tigris and Euphrates. And large amounts of people were moving into the city. By the 13th century, at the fall of Baghdad, there were over 3 million people in one city at that time. People were dying, and you have inheritance. So now, the inheritance tells you from the Quran, give this one half, give this one a quarter, give this one twice the other one. So now you need fractions, right? This is a practical thing. This is not a magic trick. It's a real reality on the ground. You're paying zakat. How do you pay your zakat? How you break it into sections? How do you calculate your zakat? So you need like calculators, a calculating system. You have great wars, so ghanima comes, booty comes. How do you divide the ghanima amongst the soldiers? Right? Fractions. And so one of the great scientists, Al-Khwarizmi, he wrote a book, Kitab al-Muqtasa fi Hisab al-Jaba wal-Muqabala. This was the work that he did. Okay, now if you look at this title here, you will see right in the title itself, this abbreviated book, Kitab al-Muqtasa, right? It's abbreviation, fi hisab al-jabr, right? This is a different kind of counting. That's algebra. See the word al-jabr? That's where the word algebra comes from. So Al-Khwarizmi developed algebra. How many people who are taking algebra courses realize that a Muslim with a thobe and a turban on and a beard, right? Right? He was the one who actually started the science that you're studying. How many know this? How many Muslims know this? So this is part of coming out of this inferiority complex that we have concerning our past and concerning what the abilities are that we actually can do. And so, if we look at the sciences that were originated by Muslims, algebra, anesthesia, biology, botany, cardiology, chemistry, which comes from alchemy, right? Alchemia, dermatology, embryology, emergency medicine, geology, metallurgy, modern surgery, modern medicine, modern arithmetic, optics, parasitology, pharmacology, pulmonary medicine, toxicology, urology. Muslims originated this. That's the extent that they reached during this time. Let's look at some of the sciences that were advanced by Muslims. Acoustics, sound, right? You'll see, and we went to a masjid in Spain, in Cordoba. And in this masjid, which could seat thousands of people, and they said that when the imam stood there, how the building was set up, you could hear him all over the masjid. No loudspeaker, acoustics, right? They developed a way to trap and carry the sound by the structure itself. So amazing achievement. Agronomy, anatomy, calculus, electrochemistry, engineering, genetics, geometry, geophysics, metallurgy, physics, taxonomy, thermodynamics, zoology, all of these different areas. It's amazing achievements. What are some of the substances brought into Europe by Muslims? Now, how do you think you're civilized? If you go into a hotel room or a house, a high-class house, what makes it civilized? You look at how they build the house, you look at their porcelains, you look at their food, you look at the sheets on their beds. You know, what makes it upper class or lower class? This is what Muslims brought into Europe. Pendulums, cotton, paper, glass mirrors, crystal, street lamps. The streets were lit for over 10 miles in each direction in Cordoba, 700 years before Paris and London. 700 years. The street lamps. Colored glass, satin, pepper, paper money, postage stamps, book binding, clocks, soap. That was an important one right there, right? Soap. They brought that into Europe. Astrolabes, compasses, slide rules, flasks, surgical instruments, windmills, artificial teeth. Your teeth. It was Muslims who brought it into Europe. And it continues. Surgical instruments, windmills, artificial teeth, spinning wheels, globes, citrus fruits, eyeglasses, porcelain, gunpowder, cables, velvet, almanacs, encyclopedias, saddles, and leather shoes. This is only some of the things. There's hundreds of things. So now, when a person's writing the history of Europe, I want to show you how these great liars, remember, Dajjalun Kadhabun. You got a problem here. The ancient Egyptians had pyramids, and Greece was in a village. So how do you say that you started math? One historian comes along and said, aliens flew down and built the pyramids. You ever heard of that before? They actually wrote this in history books. Aliens came down and built that. It could not be Africans that do that. Right? The aliens came down. What did they do with Muslims in Europe? They Latinized the names. So instead of saying Ibn Rushd, they say Averroes. So if you saw the name Averroes in a book, you think it's like a Latin name or something. His name is Ibn Rushd. He also did Bidayat al-Mujtahid. He was a great, tafsir, fiqh, philosophy. Okay. Avenzoa is actually Ibn Zuhr. Avicenna, this is medicine, right? Ibn Sina. Al-Bitruji, Al-Petragius, right? Al-Haytham was a great scientist, Al-Hayzan. Right? Al-Kindi, they left Al-Kindi. Al-Zahrawi, Abul Qasis. Al-Logarithmus, like logarithms, logarithms, right? Al-Khawarizmi. Okay? So this is how they hide the names. Al-Patagnius, Al-Battani, right? Al-Razi, also great, Rasis. See what they do? Jabir bin Hayyan, they say Jabir. Umar Khayyam, they left him Umar. The Spanish even use Umar, as a name. Okay? There's hundreds like this. An American came along and he wrote a book. His name is Walt Taylor. And he recorded in the 1930s approximately 1,000 English words of Arabic origin. These are some of the words that Walt Taylor had inside of his books. Admiral is Amir al-Baha. Admiral, right? Alcohol, alcohol. Alcove is al-Qubba. Algebra, right? Al-Jabr. A logarithm, al-Khwarizmi. There's your almanac, al-Manakh. Amber is Anbar. Arsenal, for those Arsenal supporters in football. I said this in London and they went crazy because Arsenal is Dar es-Sina. It's an Arabic word. Arsenal. Assassin. That sounds like you Muslims. Assassin. Hashashin. Right? Hashashin. That's the word. Caliber. Qalib. Camphor is kafur. Check. Your check to the Bank of Montreal. Sec. Arabic word. When you're writing a check, right? Chemistry from alchemia. Cotton is qutn. Lemon from lemon. Magazine like Time magazine. Makhazin. It's Arabic word. Magazine. I mean, there's so many things that we actually have and use. And it's in our world, but the reality has been changed. Right? Dajjalun, kadhabun. Mattress that you lay in your bed in your hotel. Matrah. Monsoon is the mosim al-amtar. Sugar is sukkar. Syrup is sharab. Typhoon is tufan. And zero is sifr. See? This is just a taste of what the Muslims were doing. And so there's so much in this area. This is a study in itself, which inshallah one day we could go into in a lot of details. It's an amazing study. For any of you who want to follow this up, there's a work called 1001 Islamic Inventions. And you can go online and you can actually, there's a set of posters and there's a big thick book, 1001 Islamic Inventions. They're in the UK. And you can buy it online and they'll send it to you. And you'll actually see thousands of inventions that are actually done by Muslims. So another area we want to focus on, which is important for our thesis, is astronomy. Because you need to know, which direction you're going in, where you are on Earth. Remember, Columbus was they were trying to frighten people and say the Earth is like a square. If you go to the end of it, you're going to fall off. That's the story they were telling people. Okay? But Muslims, during this time period, we were naturally geared toward astronomy and medicine and science, especially astronomy. Because every time we want to pray, we need to have direction. So the average Muslim, who's not even a scientist, is trying to find Qibla. So by you trying to find Qibla, you got to know where the north is. And if you don't have a compass, you got to start knowing your directions, right? And then the stars and whatnot. So We're naturally orientated toward this. Okay? So through this, the salat and then Hajj, your direction that you're taking, you have to travel from Indonesia, on the oceans to come up. You're high in the mountains of Nepal. There, you got to come down the mountains. You got to cross the desert in West Africa, North Africa, and over. How do you do this? So this is where amazing achievements are made. And this is where Muslims took the lead in the world at the time. And some of the textbooks, that's how some of the textbooks look like. You would see your Arabic writing, right? And then you will see science and medicine and botany, biology with Arabic, right? Many times people think Arabic is only like a holy language. I went to one country and everything they saw in Arabic, they put it up, they said it's like Quran. I said, no, man, you can swear in Arabic, right? Like you can say some bad things in Arabic, right? That's not the Quran. So the science also, and that's something for us, which is actually different, that science was actually being transmitted to different nations through Arabic. It was a language of science. In the same way, we will learn English and we will learn French and German in order that we want to make scientific achievements. This is some of our instruments, the astrolabe, quadrants, sextants, compasses, and many more. This picture I took, I visited the country of Oman, and we went to Muscat, and then I went along the coast to a place called Sur. It's right near the end of Oman, a place called Ras al-Had. It's right on the end, the tip. And I was hosted by a man named Abu Ahmed, who was one of the navigator. He had his own boat, and he used to live on the ocean, Omani. And so we went to eat dinner, and he brought out his family treasures. And it was a giant compass. See that picture? It's that size, like this, that he kept on his boat, right? And then this quadrant, I believe it is. From generation to generation, they were passing down this equipment. He took us on his boat. His boat was so big that he had an apartment in the back of the boat. His wife had 2 babies in there. That's how big the boat was. They live on the ocean. And so this was a natural thing for Muslims to move, because the question will come to you, how can you cross the Atlantic before Columbus? That you people can't do that. You don't have the ability to do that. But we know that the Omanis had reached, before the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they reached Japan. So they were traveling all around the world. And it was nothing strange. Another good example of this in astronomy is Ma'mun also. He commissioned one of his scientists, Al-Farghani. This is in 830. And he gave him the writings of Ptolemy. Ptolemy is a great Greek scientist in astronomy. So he gave him Ptolemy's writings, and he took that, which was a lot theoretical, because they had astronomy and astrology. So they were looking for power in the stars and magic and all types of things, gods. Right? He took out all of that, and he made it into a practical science. And this book written by Al-Farghani became the main authority for astronomy in Western Asia and Europe for 700 years. See that time there? For 700 years. That's the main book. So these are the achievements Muslims were making. We were fully capable in terms of our science, our understanding, our maps, our technology. We were fully capable to travel to other parts of the world, long before Columbus came along. European scientists made great contributions. There's no doubt about it. But this concept that they give of human beings being apes, right, and their back straightens up, when they reach Europe, their front suddenly straight. Right? This is the opposite of reality. It's the opposite of reality. People were already in major civilizations, right, before Europe actually came, out of its, dark ages. That's the reality of our story, not his story. In his story, they would have the rest of the world as the apes. But in our story, we know that human beings come from, great scientists came from all different societies. Okay, some of the books, if you want to do some personal research, and we'll make this information available. But some of the books is K. Ajram, The Miracle of Islamic Science. These are books you can get right now. S.E. al-Jazairi, there's an Algerian scholar in London, al-Jazairi, everybody calls him Algerian. He has written a number of really good books. He's active right now. He has a place called Beit al-Hikmah Press, right in London. He did a book called The Hidden Debt to Islamic Civilization. Big, thick book showing all the achievements Muslims made. The golden age of decline of the Islamic civilization. He showed how we went down also. You can get his books online at the Beit al-Hikmah Press. There's also Nafis Ahmed, Muslim Contributions to Geography. That's another text as well that we can get. To give you some non-Muslims who showed Muslim science, J.D. Burnell, a book called Science and History. That's MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He recognized Muslims. Sayyid al-Nasr, Science and Civilization. That's also a really good book. Okay, J. Sutton, Introduction of History of Science. There's Walt Taylor, Arabic Words in English, published by the Oxford Press. These are some of the texts that you can do your own private research. We are starting like this to set the groundwork for the journeys across the ocean. Before you go across there, your mind has got to be prepared, because otherwise we'll never believe that we can do this, right? We'll never believe we can do this. Okay, so this is part of the groundwork. Before we end today, are there any questions anybody has? General questions anybody has concerning anything we've covered today? The class we have a formal setup, but it is set to be a workshop. So you can feel free to ask questions and whatever you want when the time comes. So the floor is open. Yeah. Tayyip Erdogan, what did he base it on? We will see in the next period. We're going to go into more details. There are actually maps in the Topkapi Museum done by a man named Piri Reis in 1517. He presented these maps to the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. And it shows maps of America, detailed maps. So Turks have this right now in Topkapi Museum. I'm going to show you a picture. Next class, inshallah, I'm going to show you a picture of his map. So the Turks actually have this information in the Topkapi. So he must have heard a lecture or ran into some of their scientists. They know about this. Okay, he's bold enough to say it to the world. But so this is a very important bit of knowledge to understand. And again, this is part of our understanding. We need self-worth now, right? We need to value ourselves. We don't value ourselves. We need to value our people and our histories, and not to look down upon ourselves. Question. Basically, in the Muslim countries, their educational systems are colonial education. Because in all the areas where the British controlled or the French controlled, they instituted colonial education. And so they will teach you, instead of Middle East, they say Ash-Sharq al-Awsat. Same thing, right? They just translate into Arabic. I tried this. I went to the countries. I asked the people who discovered America. In many countries, I went to 61 countries, right? And I asked the people. And they said, Christopher Columbus. I said, you people are brainwashed. But they never even thought about it. They never thought that there's people sitting there looking at him. How can you say you discovered the place? So the educational systems, there are some countries now who are actually controlling their curriculums, and they're changing the curriculum. But you'll see many Muslim countries up until now, their curriculums are controlled by Western countries. You'll see it when you try to go into education. It's shocking, but that's the reality. From the religious point of view, unfortunately, our scholars, because of the colonialism, they reacted and they went into a cocoon. So the curriculums in the Islamic education, which I went to an Islamic university, they don't teach you science and math and any of this. And they teach very little history. They focus on, Quran, Hadith, Tafsir, whatnot, these classical sciences. But the way in the Islamic universities of the past, you'd study Tafsir and then math. You study Hadith and then biology. But now they don't do that. They're strictly on Islamic subjects, so-called Islamic subjects. But really, Islamic subjects are supposed to be everything, integrated. And that's a change that they have to go to too. Our madrasas are opening up now and coming out of the cocoon. I don't blame them. They actually saved a lot of our knowledge by making a cocoon, so the colonial powers would not destroy everything. But now they have to open up and integrate other aspects of knowledge into the curriculums. So when the student graduates from the Darul Uloom or the Islamic University of Medina, that person is just not good in Aqidah and Tafsir, right? They have a skill, right? They know the world. That's the way it's supposed to be. But that's a change our educational systems are going through. Yeah. The theory of evolution, and of course, this will depend upon where you actually, where you're studying. But in the major universities there, they teach. It depends on where you are. The Turks, they have some people who are actually opposing the theory of evolution. But many of the other Muslim countries, they just teach straight Western education if you go to the university. In the Islamic universities, they won't even teach science like that. They don't even go near it. So there's no theory of evolution anyway. And the ones who go into science, they are saying this is science. It's something they have to come out of. But it's an inferiority complex that we don't have to accept all of the kufr. Because Darwin never proved that one species could turn into another species. He never proved that. He only proved that the species changes according to the climate. Like the fur gets thicker and, whatever. But he never said a chicken turns into a monkey. Right? He could never prove anything like this. But this is part of our inferiority complex, coming out of that system, and really having our own alternative system. Okay? Any other general questions anybody has? Yeah. That's right. Where did you study at? In Kuwait, right. You see, some of our institutions, have individuals who studied in the West and went back, right? And they can break this down. They might not, be sanctioned by the curriculum, but they do it for the students. So that's how it's changing. The battle now going on is with the curriculums. Who controls the curriculums? And it's literally, a struggle that's going on. as to who actually controls, because the one who controls the educational system, in a sense, is part of the mind of the students, the direction of the mind of the students. You see, so that is a struggle that is happening right now, right across the board, in the Muslim world. Okay, any other final questions? So inshallah, next week we will continue on into this journey of discovery, the real discovery of our story and not his story. Billahi tawfiq, wa sallallahu ta'ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and press that bell icon below. Have a nice day.